Rishi Sunak's pledge was up until 2030, most of which could, in theory, be a time of a Labour government. I've been getting a reaction from the Shadow Environment Secretary, Sophy Ridge.
Well, Keir Starmer has called for precisely that already.
Has he? What?
Yes.
2.5% by 2030?
2.5% as the target we need to get to, because that is part of our obligations.
By 2030?
That is part of our obligations as a member of NATO. So that is what Labour would be working towards as resources allow, is what Keir said.
But that was previously the Conservatives' position as well.
Yes.
You've said when conditions allow.
Yes.
Now, today, the change is the government saying they want to do it by 2030.
Correct.
Do you want to match that? Would you do it by 2030?
Yes, Labour would want to match that. I think what we see is escalating threats to the security of our country, and the primary objective of any government surely is the defence of the realm. We're seeing the invasion of Ukraine by Vladimir Putin. We're seeing what's going on in the Red Sea and the Middle East at the moment. We're seeing a resurgent and increasingly threatening China as well. Britain needs to make sure that we are secure, but also that we are playing our part within the NATO alliance and meeting our obligations for 2.5% of GDP within that. Now, I'm glad that Rishi Sunak has said what he's said. I'm disappointed that that's not what the Conservatives have been working towards for these past 14 years, because they've actually reduced the army by 40,000 troops since they were elected. We now have the smallest army since the Napoleonic Wars. Now, all well and good for Rishi Sunak belatedly to see that defence of our country is important, but I'm interested to see how he proposes to find the money to fund this, and then we can look at that, scrutinise that, and take a view about the feasibility of it.
So just to be crystal clear, you've said you would like to see Labour match what the Conservatives have said today, so you would like Labour to commit to saying you'll spend 2.5% of GDP on defence by 2030.
That's right. That's
Correct.
part of our NATO obligations. But we need to look and see how Rishi Sunak is proposing to fund this, so we can take a view on that. I haven't seen that yet, any more than you have.
No, I haven't.
And really, the Prime Minister hasn't actually published that information. I'm sure it will come out over the following days and weeks. So the right thing to do would be take a step back, have a look at those numbers when they come out, and assess the feasibility of what he's telling us.
But, I mean, you've just committed to it as well, so, surely you must think it is feasible if you're both committing to 2.5% by 2030.
We were already committed to getting to that figure as resources allow.
When conditions allow. That's very different, let's be honest. We're talking about £75 billion here. I mean, just to put that in context, the core schools budget is about £60 billion. How are you going to find that money? Well, I'll ask the same question to the Conservatives.
Let's have a look at, the government has got proposals for this, that they haven't published that yet. We need to have a look at those proposals, and then we can take an assessment on the feasibility of what they are saying they want to achieve. But I think the objective is right. We're seeing heightened threats to this country's security. You could talk about all of the other things that we want to do within this country, but if the country's not safe and secure, none of those things can be done. Yeah. So the defence of the realm must come first. We'll look at what the Conservatives are proposing. We'll comment on those.
At the same time, and I absolutely take your point about the defence of the realm, about the fact many people believe we're in a pre-war world, but the scale of the decisions that would be needed to get to an extra £75 billion on defence, more than the entire schools budget, is huge. I mean, we managed to create the welfare state because defence spending was wound down after, the World War. And what are we going to do this time round? How do we get to put this country on a war footing in terms of defence spending while also keeping public services? How do we do that?
Labour has a plan for economic growth that we believe will help to fund this. The Conservatives have been watching the economy flatline and even shrink. Yep. So I'm interested in seeing what Rishi Sunak says about how he's going to fund that, given what he's done to the economy. Our plan for growth gives us the opportunity to meet those targets, but that is why Keir Starmer said, as resources allow.
I mean, everyone wants growth, don't they? Well, Conservatives want growth.
The Conservatives haven't delivered growth.
Reform want growth. Labour want growth.
But the economy grew 50% faster every single year under the 13 years of Labour government than under these 14 years of Conservative government. So we know we can grow the economy faster. We have a plan for growth. The Conservatives have given up.
OK.
So let's see.
You're launching your rural crime strategy today. What's the plan?
Well, the issue behind this is crime in rural areas has shot up by 30% since the Conservatives came to power. I've been getting out in rural communities a lot recently, talking to farmers, talking to landowners, talking to people that work in the countryside as well. And they tell me they never see a police officer anymore. And there are forms of crime that are unique, perhaps, to the countryside that are simply being ignored. Now, Labour's got a plan to tie up procurement against the police forces to generate enough savings to fund at least 13,000 additional neighbourhood police officers.
You said that there's some crimes unique to the countryside, and
Yes.
often, when we're thinking about crime, we think about cities, we think about urban crime. Do you think that there's a bit of a bias there?
Well, it's gone up faster in rural areas, hasn't it, than in urban areas, although, of course, it's gone up in urban areas as well. So they seem to have failed everywhere. But I think there is a particular problem with rural areas, and there are different forms of crime. I was speaking to a sheep farmer recently, absolutely distraught at the fact that there were people coming with XL bully dogs, setting them loose on the sheep and lambs to train them to be more aggressive because they're training them to fight. Now, it's horrific to think of her animals being killed in that way. It's a huge loss of value to her in people coming and doing this. But she was telling me that she finds the police, they don't even come. There aren't enough police to be clear about that. So the 13,000 additional officers that we can put out on the streets will respond to people like that. But we have to stop treating crime in rural areas as an afterthought, just because it's not as visible to so many, perhaps, of the media. It's debilitating to rural areas. They deserve to be kept safe as well. And Labour's plan to tackle rural crime shows that we are on the side of those people who want to take back control of their streets in our rural communities.
OK, thank you very much indeed, Steve Ridge.
Thank you, Sophie.